Hi everybody, Doug Coons here with Veracity IIR. Today we'll be talking to Dan Taylor, a retired U.S. Postal Inspector Service agent. Dan retired last year from his agency and is now a senior investigator for Veracity IIR. So here is our interview. Hi, Doug Coons here with Veracity IIR, and today we're going to be talking to one of our key team members, Dan Taylor. And Dan, prior to coming to Veracity, was an investigator for the United States Postal Inspectors Service. So welcome, Dan, and how are you doing?
I'm great. Glad to be here.
So you were a postal inspector. Tell us about that. What is that? How does it differ from, say, the FBI, DEA, ATF, the other federal agencies?
Okay. Well, the U.S. Postal Inspection Service is the law enforcement branch for the post office, and we do pretty much everything that all the other federal law enforcement agencies do. But the key difference is what we do or the cases we investigate have to have some kind of impact on the post office or involvement with the mail. And a good example would be mail fraud, where somebody could be doing, say, some kind of an internet type of fraud, but through it, they get their victims to send checks to them through the mail. Well, now that becomes mail fraud, and that becomes something that a postal inspector can do. Beyond the typical fraud cases, we did a lot of protection of the mail work, or a big part of that was involved. A big part of that involved a unit referred to as dangerous mail investigations. And that could be everything from sending drugs through the mail to a suspicious substance is in a letter leaking, and they have to freeze operations at a post office till we can figure out what's going on. And we had postal inspectors specially trained to go and test the substance and either give a thumbs up to resume operations, or we would take it as an investigation. Yeah. One of the strengths that postal inspectors bring is kind of having a knowledge of how the mail system works, and it's amazing how just a little bit of backtracking, we can figure out a lot about who sent the letter.
Yeah, I remember on like the Unabomber case, you were able to figure out what specific mailbox that he had put those packages into.
Yeah, yep. It's just a lot of amazing things, use of data that a lot of people don't necessarily associate with the mail, but there actually is quite a bit of sophistication to moving the mail.
What specifically, did you have an area of expertise within your realm, or any particular case that stood out to you as fun to work, interesting, impactful, that kind of thing?
Yeah, I during my career, I actually worked a pretty big variety of cases. Worked a little bit of workplace violence, which the post office has anywhere between 400,000 and 600,000 employees, and many of them are out on the street every day, where everything from violent crimes involving weapons to thefts. We actually have sexual assaults that I've investigated. Just different things happening on the street. But for the most part, I worked a lot of financial crimes, everything from identity theft on up to multi-million-dollar telemarketing scams. Worked several embezzlements, but I would say probably my favorite case was one where it started out as there was two, I use the word loosely, businessmen disputing a $90,000 check that came up in an exception report. that I was asked to take a look at this. Well, as I dug into the case, I found out that this check was actually from an insurance company. And as I did a little more investigating, discovered that this was tied to a suspicious fire on a property owned by one of these people. Well, as I dug further, I started looking at this person's finances going back a few years. It found out that there was actually somewhere between 10 and 12 checks that he had collected over the years tied to suspicious fires of commercial properties he owned. So, from there, started working with the insurance companies, looking at their documents. We focused on two of the more recent fires, and we actually were able to charge the suspect with 2 counts of arson, as well as a handful of counts of mail fraud, tied into documents that, basically there were some certifications he had to fill out and then mail in order to get his claims, and those became the basis for mail fraud. And
so you only need one mailing, right?
Yeah, that's correct. We
Yep.
only need one mailing to show mail fraud.
Excellent. So you got into the actual arson piece of it, or were the insurance investigators working that piece, or ATF? How do you work an arson case?
I actually I got more into the financial aspects of the arson case. The cases were old enough that they were more suspicious as opposed to clear-cut arson. But when you started looking at the totality of the circumstances, that was on the back end, that became enough to charge him with arson. So I did get a little bit into looking at like I remember one of the houses, there was on the counter where the fire had started, there was evidence of accelerant being sprayed. And looking through some photos, there was a can of lighter fluid that had been stored underneath the kitchen sink. So, I was able to point that out, but it wasn't necessarily getting in and learning how to do a full investigation. It was helping to find some of the circumstantial evidence.
Okay, so that I assume you got convictions on that one.
Yeah, that you don't want to get a federal arson charge, especially when it involves multiples. In this particular case, the first conviction would carry a 10-year minimum sentence. A second conviction would be an additional 20-year minimum. So, this individual had a lot of motivation to take a plea on one of them, on one of the cases, as opposed to looking at 30 years plus, if he would get anything else for the mail fraud.
Wow. Anybody get hurt in those arsons?
Luckily, no. But that was, one of our big motivators, is realizing that, there are firefighters and other people there that could have been hurt.
Right.
But because these properties were all occupied by family members and associates of our suspect, the houses just mysteriously were all vacant at the time of the fires.
Yeah, that's what we would call a clue in the FBI.
Right.
So, yeah. Hey guys, I can't tell you why, but you need to be elsewhere at 3 o'clock on Thursday.
Yep, and that was actually one of the big breaks in the case. Was one of his friends claimed to be away for work, and a little bit of legwork showed that he wasn't actually working. And we were able to put a lot of pressure on him, and he finally admitted that he had been told by the suspect to not be around, and had been kind of coached what to say to the insurance company. So yeah, that was a big part of the case.
Excellent. Sounds interesting. So you retired last year and came to work for us. Particularly interesting cases you've worked on for Veracity.
Yeah, you know, I think one of the favorite ones that I had was actually one of my more recent ones, involving a bus that crashed into a stopped vehicle, and you know, unfortunately ended up in a fatality. But what was enjoyable to me about that case was, you know, first of all, being able to help the family of of you know, something that had been really devastating and tragic, which that was one of the main reasons I enjoyed law enforcement, was being able to help people. But you know, the other part that I enjoyed about the case was there was just a lot of different angles and different things to check out. uh, you know, I got creative and used social media to find a witness we didn't know about. And you know, I enjoyed, you know, being able to dig a little bit deeper.
You're still bringing justice to people.
Yep, exactly.
Um, don't want to go too long here. What about your future plans? What do you see the next 5 years bringing?
Um, that's a good question, because that's, you know, that talked about the void from going from 100 miles per hour in a law enforcement position to, you know, now it's a little slower pace. Uh, you know, I still have that void. I'm trying to figure out, you know, what it is that I want to do with my time. You know, I'm hoping to get back into some more volunteer work. Actually, I used to coach travel baseball quite a bit before I was in a management position, and just didn't have the time for it. So that's probably, you know, looking ahead. You know, I hope to plug back into the community and you know, get more involved with the things I used to be able to do.
Cool. All right, Dan. Well, thanks for your time, and we'll talk to you soon.
All right, great, thanks.
Okay.